Hello everyone, Toshit here. Today we're going to talk about securing your Microsoft 365 environment using conditional access policies. Well, conditional access policies is nothing but a set of rules that you define to secure your 365 environment and your resources in Azure. Now, with the conditional access policies, you can basically define granular level permissions on how your users will access your data. For example, you might want them to satisfy multi-factor authentication, for example, or you probably don't want to give them access to a specific resource and probably want them to change their password, or want them to logging in from a secure device, or from a different location. So you can actually define all of these controls using conditional access policies. Well, enough of talking. Let's go and check out how to perform and define all these access policies. So in order to create conditional access policies, you need to browse to portal.azure.com. I am currently logged in with my global admin account to portal.azure.com. So from there, I'll click on Azure Active Directory. Once we are into Azure Active Directory, on your left hand side, I'll scroll down to find out an option called security. Once I click on security, then you click on conditional access. So this is the conditional access page where you can actually create new policies. You have a couple of options, whether you want to create a new policy from scratch, or you can actually create a policy based on a template which Microsoft has provided to you. So let's have a look at the creating a policy from template. What sort of options are there? If I click on that, so these are all the templates that Microsoft has pre-configured to start with. If you're not sure of what controls you need to define and what conditions you need to define, you can basically have a look at this. So for example, this policy requires multi-factor authentication for your admins. So if I click view on that policy, it now tells me that what sort of assignments are there, what conditions are there, what actions are there, if a user tries to access any of the services. So if you're happy with that, you can basically just click on review plus create, and from there you can put the policy in off mode, on mode, or report only mode, and down there it actually kind of pre-configured for based on all the roles. So this policy is for admins, so it's actually including all of these admin roles. But you don't have to use all these pre-configured templates. You can basically create a similar policy using a new policy option to create a custom policy. If I click on conditional access again, now before we start a new policy, couple of things you probably want to note. There are some options to manage within the policy itself. So things like named locations. So this is the place where you can actually define all of your IP ranges based on the countries. These kind of locations can be defined as trusted locations. You can give it a name, for example, trusted locations for office, and you can click on the plus button and define your IP range for your office network. So once this is created, you can basically use this new location in your conditional access policies to basically create different events for your users. So we'll cancel that out for now, and the other options here are basically you can define terms of use, which again you can use in your conditional access policies. And then there is a authentication context. So authentication context, again you can create a new authentication context. There are some kind of documentation about how to configure authentication context and assigning these into conditional access policies. So it's basically simply about creating a new context. You give it a name, give it a description, and you publish it to apps and select one of the IDs. And then when we define a conditional access policy, you can basically use this authentication context. The next one is about authentication strengths. So authentication strength, obviously, again, your users are trying to access any sensitive information you can basically use, any of these pre-configured ones, which basically says a user is trying to access something. You probably want them to more kind of stronger authentication. So for example, if I click on multi-factor authentication, this is pre-configured, but you can create your own authentication strengths. So this will basically ask your users to provide all of these options, or maybe perform a password plus software auth token or password plus SMS. So you're basically asking your users to provide stronger authentication to just prove that you are the person who's trying to access these resources. This is really great if you have more sensitive information and you want to make sure that the information is actually accessed by a right person. You can actually use these authentication strengths. So we close that out as well. Now let's go back into our conditional access and try to create a conditional access policy. So I'll start with clicking on the new policy button, and we need to provide a policy name. So let's call it MFA policy for all users, because we want our users to perform MFA when they try to access any of the 365 applications within our tenancy. So MFA for all users. All right, so that's the name. Now you need to select who you want to apply this policy to. So you can include all of the users, anyone within the organization. When they try to access the resources or apps we define, policy will be applicable to those users. Or you can select particular users. So for example, if you are creating a policy which is just targeting a subset of users for a particular application, right, then you can create this policy. So in a sense, you can actually create multiple policies targeting different applications, different devices and different conditions. This policy is all about all users, so we're just going to use all users. But just to give you an idea, you can actually, if you select users and group, you can click on guests or external guests, and then under the drop down it gives you an option of what kind of guest or external users you want to select. And if you just go for the directory roles, so this is basically all of your directory roles within your Azure. So you probably want to define or assign this policy to all the application administrators or all the application developers. You can pick and choose all of the different roles from your Azure. So if you want to create a policy for every admin, then you can select all of the admins from this policy, and then they obviously have to perform MFA or whatever conditions we define here. For this exercise, we're just going to create this policy for all users, or maybe we can just select particular users. So for example, I just want to assign it to a single user. So let's just go ahead and assign it to a single user so that we can actually do a demo as well. I'll click on all users, then I'll select Chris Green, and I want to assign this policy to Chris Green, and click on select. So now we have one user who we want to apply this policy to. You can also exclude any users. So for example, if you have selected all users, but if you want to exclude a subset of users, those users might be some executives in your organization, or you might have some service accounts, right? So you can click on this option and you can actually select those service accounts. Although you have selected all users under your include section, but when you define any of these service accounts or any users within the exclude list, then this policy won't apply for those users who are excluded from this section. So we don't want to exclude any users because we only assigning this policy to a single user. So let's just close this one, and let's just keep it to include and apply it to Chris Green. So next section is about cloud applications or actions. So if you just click on this I button, it basically says applications accessed or user actions. So click on this options. Now under these options, it's basically saying what applications or what we want to apply this policy to. So it has select what this policy applies to. We have few options here. It says cloud applications, user actions, or authentication context. Now this authentication context is what we actually previously talked about, which you can define under the conditional access policies from these options on your left. So for cloud apps, so either can be none, or you can apply this to all cloud apps. So all cloud apps are basically all the applications within your Office 365 tenancy. So applications like Exchange Online, SharePoint, Teams, etc. Or you can actually select particular apps and click on select. Now from right hand side, I can basically select the applications I want this policy to apply to. So for example, I probably just want the users to do multi-factor authentication when they try to access SharePoint Online. So basically any of the SharePoint sites, and I'll just click select, and this will apply to just the SharePoint applications. But it's a good idea to apply this to all cloud applications unless you are defining a specific policy with some granular controls and conditions. But this is a generic policy. It's a general policy because we're just applying a multi-factor authentication for all of our users who are trying to access any of the cloud applications within our tenancy. So I'm just going to say all cloud apps for this. The other options are basically user actions. So under user actions, you can say select the action policy applies to when your users try to register their security information. So for example, you have self-service password reset enabled and you have multi-factor authentication, and when a user tries to add any of the security information for things like they want to register for email confirmation for MFA to perform. So when they try to add that information, then that's where they will be prompted for MFA. Now in order to use registry security information, you need to have the combined experience enabled, which is basically one authentication experience for your self-service password reset and for multi-factor authentication. The other option is about register or join devices. So this policy can only be enabled on required multi-factor authentication policy. So this is where when the users are trying to register or join their devices into your Azure space. So let's uncheck this box, and we just want to go to the cloud apps and we want to enable this to all cloud apps. Again, you can exclude any of the cloud apps that you don't want this policy to apply to. You can click on this select excluded cloud apps, and you can basically select any of the apps that you don't want this policy be applied to. So but we want this to be applied to every single app, so we're just going to go back to the include button and just say all cloud apps. The next one is conditions. So these are the conditions. So basically saying control access based on signals from conditions like risk, device, platform, location, client, apps, or device state. So under this section, you can basically define what device platforms you want to apply this to. So for example, when you click on yes configure, all of these options becomes available. So you can say any device. So basically we're saying that when a user trying to access all these cloud apps from any devices, which could be your iOS device, Android, Windows Phone, or Mac, we want the user to be prompted for MFA. Or you can basically select a particular device platform. You can say, I just want this to apply to any users who are using iOS devices to access these applications. But that probably won't work because all of the other users who are using Windows or Mac OS, they won't be prompted for MFA. So we just want to apply this to any device. Or you can just basically say configure no, which basically applying to kind of anyone who's trying to access, they will be prompted for MFA regardless of what device they're trying to access from. So we close this one as well. The next one is about locations. So under locations, you can configure the locations. So for example, you can say whenever a user is trying to access from any locations, which means it could be from your home or from your office or from any location, right? They will be prompted for MFA. But this really becomes, kind of frustrating for some of the users if they have to do the MFA, even if they are working from some trusted locations. For example, your office locations. So you can say, yes, do that for all locations or all trusted locations, right? But this probably won't work, because if you say all trusted locations, you're already trusted, right? So what we want to do is we want to assign this policy saying that users can actually access from any location. They will be prompted from MFA, but we want to exclude the trusted locations. So these are the locations you basically can define under the conditional access page. So we looked at defining the locations, and you can mark them as trusted locations. So you can say all trusted locations, or you can select the locations. So if you click on selected locations, click on none, and this is the IP range. If you define any trusted locations from the conditional access page, that will appear there, and you can basically select that. So when a user tries to access this application, and if they are within this IP range, this could be your office location, they won't be prompted for MFA, right? The next option is about client apps. This section talks about whether you want to prompt your users for MFA if they are trying to access it from a browser or from mobile apps. There's a legacy authentication clients as well. So you probably want to configure that as well and say, yep, modern authentication clients. You don't want to check these boxes because the legacy authentication clients don't basically honor MFA. We say, yep, configure it for this, and which is select. After that, the next one is about filter for devices. Now this is a new option that Microsoft has released. It's been quite a while it's there now, but in this section what you really can do is you can basically define any of the devices, right? So for example, let's just choose a property. You want to include filter devices in the policy, and you choose a property, and you can say where manufacturer equals Apple, for example, right? Any of the devices which are manufactured by Apple, this policy will be applied to that. You can create more expressions. You can say and or you can say the manufacturer equals HP, for example, right? So this way you can really drill down onto the devices based on their make, model, their display name, their physical IDs, and some extension attributes. So this is quite handy to really drill down into applying for access and prompting your users for MFA or some other conditions based on the devices. You might want to use this if, for example, you have you have a device and a particular application can only be accessed through that device. So you can really tie that onto this device and say you probably want your users to perform for multi-factor authentication or for more granular authentication strengths, because that device contains more sensitive information, and that's kind of heavily used by the admins and stuff. So this is how you can actually use this option. So we're not configuring these options either, so we're just going to cross it and say okay. The next one then is about granting controls. So we have defined our users, we have defined what applications we need, we have defined the conditions we need. Now what do we want to do if all of these conditions are met? So when a user tries to access this application, in our case Chris Green tries to access any of the Office 365 application, we want him to be prompted for multi-factor authentication. All right, so or you can basically say we require more strengths. So as you can see that these are the three options there. These are the predefined options. So in the previous window when we were talking about conditional access, there was an option about authentication strength. You can create your custom authentication strengths as well. So we can choose this one, which basically says users will need to provide a combination of methods that satisfy the strong authentication, such as password plus SMS, or you can go passwordless or phishing resistant MFA. Now you might want to use these options again if you have a more sensitive application and you really want to make sure that that the application is used by a right person. So that's that option there. The other options are you probably want your users to be logging in from the compliant devices. Now in order to use this function, whatever device the user is trying to access from, that has to be compliant. So basically that has to be registered in Intune and stuff. And the next one is about require hybrid Azure AD joint devices. And then similarly you can say required approved client application. So again that this involves Intune, and the device can be registered in Intune, and approved applications such as broker applications or company portals can be kind of deployed on that device, and then they have to use those approved applications to access the cloud applications. Or similarly this requires app protection policy. Again this involves your Intune, and your device must be protected by app protection policies. In our case we're just going to prompt the user for MFA. So we're just going to untick that and click on require multi-factor authentication. Under that there are some for multiple controls as well. So basically what we're saying is require all selected controls. So these are all the required selected controls. If you select probably this one and this one as well, so what you can force your users is to perform all of these controls, or you can say you just want one of these for your users to basically satisfy this conditional access policy. So we'll just keep it to required all selected controls and untick the others. And in our case we're just saying we just want the user to perform MFA to access this policy, and we click on select. So that's done as well. The next section is about sessions. So under sessions we have few options. The first one is use app enforced restrictions. So there could be restrictions enforced on particular apps that you probably want to be monitored. So this really only works with the supported apps, which is currently Office 365, Exchange Online, and SharePoint Online. In our case we have selected all cloud apps, so that's why this is grayed out. The next one is use conditional access app controls. So this is basically it basically enables user app access and sessions to be monitored and controlled in real time, based on the access policies that we have defined. All of these access and session policies are used within the Defender for Cloud Apps portal. The next one is about sign-in frequency. You can define whether you want to prompt your users to do the multi-factor authentication every time they sign in, but that could be really annoying. Or you can do a periodic authentication. You can probably say I want to prompt my users for every 2 days, for example, right? If you don't select this option, then the default option is basically 90 days. So if a user has prompted has signed in into any of these applications and satisfied MFA, then the next 90 days that user won't be prompted for MFA. So this is how this works. Then we have the persistent browser sessions. You can say always persistent or never persistent, which is basically saying, if a user has opened a window right now and they close that window and then they try to open that window again and try to access any applications, do you want to prompt them for MFA? So that's basically that. So by default, if you don't select it, it's basically always persistent. And then we have the customized continuous evaluation. So this option was already enabled and is enabled by default, but Microsoft has now given an option to basically disable this option as well. You probably want to leave it enabled, because what customized continuous access evaluation does is, for example, if you have revoked a license for a user, that kind of process the things immediately, rather than waiting for the session and all your access tokens to expire. So as I said, by default this is enabled, so it's actually good it's enabled. We don't want to disable it. And then the next option is disable resilience defaults. So this is basically, if there is an outage, then Azure AD will extend access to existing sessions while enforcing conditional access policies. If a policy cannot be evaluated, access is determined by resilience settings. So if resilience settings are disabled, access is denied once existing sessions expire. So it's up to you whether you want to use this option, whether you want to disable resilience defaults or not. So for our session, we're just not going to disable it, and we click close on the session button. We don't want to do anything because obviously we covered with the 90 days, we covered with the persistent browser session, which is already by default enabled, and so as this option, how this is enabled by default as well. So be happy with that. And then the next one is about enabling policy. Now you can actually enable a policy just in a report only mode. So what it does is, whenever you click on create button, when a user tries to access any of these application, it will basically won't prompt them for MFA. So this has no user impact. This is just report only, just for you to evaluate. Maybe for any applications, for example, if you want to create a policy to block any legacy applications, you can create a policy, put that in a report only mode, and then your users or your admins can actually go back into that policy and have a look at all the logs and see what sort of applications are coming in from all those legacy kind of authentication, and then they can target on those applications and try to probably switch off or disable or maybe upgrade those applications. So this is pretty handy. You can enable this policy or disable this policy. We want to enable this policy, so we'll click on and click on create button. So this policy is now created. We can see it's on, and that's the creation date. If I click on these three little buttons, it gives me an option to either delete the policy or duplicate the policy. Let's see what happens when Chris Green tries to log on into the system and what options Chris Green gets. So I will be logging as Chris Green. I'm trying from a different browser, and let's just try to browse to portal.office.com and see what happens with Chris Green. So I'll click on sign in, and we're going to sign in with Chris Green. So it's Chris G at TechByTosh.com. Click next, and we're going to enter the password. Don't want to save the password. Now this is now kicked off by the conditional access policy, which basically is saying your organization needs more information to keep your account secure. So let's just click next. And on the next screen, I now get this Microsoft Authenticator. Message is basically saying start by getting the app, which is basically a Microsoft Authenticator app. So once I install the app, then you choose next. Or I can set up a different method. Now all of these methods are basically defined by the admins. So these are the authentication methods which you can actually define from your Azure portal or from Office 365. So we just want to go ahead with the Authenticator app. I already have the app downloaded on my phone, so I'm just going to click next. It then says set up your account, then add account, select work or school accounts. I'll just say next. I then need to scan this code from the Microsoft Authenticator app. So if I open the app on my phone now, I'll just click on the plus button, and which basically says work or school account, and then I scan the QR code. Once I scan the QR code, it will automatically add that account into the Authenticator app, and will start showing me all the different IDs for that user. So I've done that, so I'll click next. So it's now asking me to make sure that I am the right person, and it had sent me a message on the Authenticator app to approve sign in. Once I have done that, then it's basically going to link that Authenticator app and just make sure that yep, that's the method which is the approved method. So I've just clicked on the approved button and then click next, and that's it, done. So this is the first time that your users will need to go through this setup. Once they have done that, then when they try to log in back again, say for example after 90 days or whatever conditions we define in our multi-factor authentication policy, they will then just be prompted for MFA, which is basically on their phone. They need, they have this code and they just need to provide the code. So I'm just going to click done, and hopefully it should now be taking me to the office.com page. Yep, so I'm in now, so I'm into office.com. I've set up my MFA and everything is fine. Let's just try to log in again with Chris G and see what happens after the person or Chris has actually already performed MFA. So I'm just going to close this browser again. This time I've opened a window in private mode, so just to rule out any sessions or anything. So let's just quickly try to log on to portal.office.com as Chris Green and see what happens. I'm going to enter the email address and password, chrisg@techbytosh.com. Click next, and we enter the password. Click sign in, and this time I've got a different window. Is basically asking me to approve my sign-in request. I have received a approved notification on my phone because I registered my phone. I registered the the Authenticator app. So I've got a approved sign-in request, so I'm just going to hit approve. Before I do that, users also get an option if they want for this note to be asked for 90 days. They can untick this option, but that can be kind of configured within the persistent sessions. So you can know more about the persistent sessions. I can talk more about that in the next video, but for now I'm just going to click approve. And once I click approve through the Authenticator app, this should now take me to the office.com, and I get the stay signed in option. I click yes, and that's it, I'm in now. So that's the user experience your users are going to get. Creating conditional access policy in Azure Active Directory is an essential step to protect your organization's data and resources. So make sure you create and define the conditional access policies for your Microsoft tenancy in your Azure Active Directory today. That's it for today. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any comments or feedback, don't forget to leave it under the comments. I hope to see you next time. Thank you.